Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Aina Deshawn, with our queer news for today. Now, I want to make you a promise. We will continue to bring you the latest in queer news, culture, and politics. So, if you're digging our intersectional take on the weekly, consider joining the QCrew. The QCrew is our monthly membership program we started to help grow this podcast. You get weekly emails from me and exclusive interviews with LGBTQ influencers from across the country. With your support, we can bring you more stories celebrating our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and comrade communities. This month, our exclusive interview for the QCrew is with Angie Harvey. Angie is a dear friend of mine and a woman on a mission to help tell our stories. Her documentary, Black Rainbow Love, was her introduction to film, and it's already won 13 awards and is making its international debut. If you want to watch this said exclusive interview, you have to join the QCrew. As always, the link is in the show notes. Family, Queer News is now a weekly podcast. My goal is to build the team up so we can properly execute a daily pod. But until then, a new episode will drop every Monday at 7 a.m. Chicago time. So if you enjoy what you hear, please leave us a review. It would be the best holiday gift. And thank you for being on the Queer News journey with us. Now for the news. Brittney Griner was moved to a penal colony. The midterm elections brought a rainbow wave no one saw coming. It's Trans Awareness Week, and let's talk about trans YouTuber Nikita Dragon stay in a men's prison. I've got an update about Touche and that racist puppet show we talked about last week. And for my word today, let me share my thoughts on Dave Chappelle's SNL appearance. All right, let's go.
You are now tuned in to higher frequencies. We do this frequently. Turn your radio station to E3 for that decency. Listen to great music and the latest movement. Safe listening for anyone that's tuned in. Who you waking up to? Aina Deshawn, QCrew and friends. It's that real talk. Online radio with the spins. You caught up in traffic, frustrated. Just check in with E3 to shift your vibrations and get elevated. That's queer radio done right. Choose to be yourself. That's the only way to live life, and that's how it's done here. Just know y'all tuned in to the greatest. Ain't no competition. We ain't worried about the other stations. Check.
BG has been wrongfully detained for 270 days. This week, I reported on social media about her being moved to a Russian penal colony. They say it usually takes weeks or a month, but this move happened rather swiftly after the U.S. Embassy came to visit. I'm also sure it was no coincidence that the move happened in alignment with the midterm elections. They still don't know where Brittney is right now, at this very moment, y'all. That's just insanity. And they won't find out until Russia feels like sending a letter to her lawyers and the U.S. Embassy supposedly in a couple of weeks. They are reporting that it took a couple of weeks prior to the war, so who knows how long it will actually take right now. Family, penal colonies are essentially labor camps, and people akin them to concentration camps. The prisoners don't live in cells, but rather barracks. The barracks could have 60 to 80 people in them, and I've read reports of numerous human rights violations, lack of heat, lack of toilets, rats, iron beds. I can go on and on. The work can go from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and it varies from digging ditches to sewing Russian army uniforms. Now, one thing is for certain, they see Brittney as a valuable asset, so I can't imagine they'd see physical harm come to her, but we just don't know. We're all just assuming. I've linked my videos in the show notes if you want to check those out, and we will continue to speak her name and call on the U.S. and Russia to orchestrate her safe return home. Bring BG home already. Our next story for today has to be about the midterm elections. It was one for the record books. midterms are often for the opposing party, not in the White House. And all the polls showed there would be a red wave sweeping the country. The pundits were saying that Democrats weren't going to retain the power they needed in the House or the Senate. Well, the midterms were a lot of things, but a red wave wasn't one of them. That alone is something to celebrate, and y'all already know, we don't get a lot of political celebrations around here. So this is one that we should actually take in and enjoy a little bit. Because Democrats don't get credit often, but I'm giving them credit today. They got Obama to dust off the microphone and get on the campaign trail.
Values that Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman stand for.
They had Biden declaring that our democracy was at stake. They went hard at the right time, and people got to the polls. The Democrats have officially retained power in the Senate. And if Senator Warnock can retain his seat in Georgia, they will actually have gained a seat in the Senate. The House is still outstanding, and that alone is still a win for Democrats.
Control of Congress still hangs in the balance.
The races were so tight that I couldn't keep watching. I don't know about you, but I had to turn it off and then turn it back on and then turn it back off. You know, and that last time I checked in, I saw reports of a rainbow wave. Not a red wave, not a blue wave, a rainbow wave. Big ups to Trav from QCrew for putting such a great synopsis together on TikTok. You can check out his video in the show notes, but let me run down a couple of stats and some of the major wins. According to the LGBTQ Victory Fund, at least 400 LGBTQ candidates won their political seat. That's a record, but get this, just over 1,000 LGBTQ folks actually ran for office, with 678 of them making it to the midterm. So with those 400 wins, 58% of all LGBTQ candidates were winners, y'all. Then on top of all of that, for the very first time, there was an LGBTQ candidate representing all 50 states. Okay, so here are some of the big winners. Maura Healey became the first woman and first lesbian elected governor of Massachusetts. Tina Kotek won her tight race in Oregon to become its next lesbian governor. Robert Garcia won California's 42nd congressional district race and will be the first gay immigrant in Congress. Eric Russell won his race for state treasurer, making him the first out Black LGBTQ person elected to a statewide office in the United States. Oh, I'm going to keep going. James Rosner of New Hampshire is the first transgender man elected to a state legislature in the U.S. And lastly, and certainly not least, in Texas, yes, Texas, they elected 3 Black, openly LGBTQ lawmakers to office in their state legislature. Christian Manuel Hayes, Jolanda Jones, and Vinton Jones. And let's talk a little bit about Vinton. Vinton is the first Black openly HIV positive elected official in the country. Anise Parker, the former mayor of Houston and current president and CEO of the LGBTQ Victory Fund, said this: "Bigots tried their best to undermine our political power, but their hate backfired and motivated more LGBTQ people to run and win than ever before." Family, I believe the Supreme Court overturning abortion rights in this country got people to the polls. The extremist hate of the Republican Party got people to the polls. It got people to care. It's sad that it takes that, but it's true. We take freedoms for granted. And one thing I know for sure is that freedom is not free.
Are you lost in your podcast journey? If so, you found the right podcast. My name is DJ Tracy Treese, and I'm a podcast producer. In partnership with theCUBE, I'm bringing you the Lost and Found for podcasters. I've worked behind the scenes on some of your favorite podcasts, and I'll be bringing you some great conversations with podcast industry experts to help you find your way through your podcast journey. There's so much information out there, and the industry is rapidly changing. No need to feel lost. You found the right podcast. Subscribe to the Lost and Found for podcasters now. Everywhere that you listen to podcasts, if you prefer your podcast in video, click the link in the description to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube.
Y'all know last week we kicked off Trans Awareness Month, and we are bringing much needed attention to our trans fam. This month is less of a celebration and more of a call to action. Many of your local organizations and community groups feature events and educational opportunities to uplift the voices and experiences of the trans, non-binary, and intersex communities. Now, yesterday kicked off Trans Awareness Week, and it ends on the 20th with Trans Day of Resilience. Some of you may know it as Trans Day of Remembrance. It's gotten a little upgrade, okay? So for my Chicago fam, I want you to check out Chicago Therapy Collective. They've got some really great events planned, so get engaged. For my fam across the country, I invite you to check out a couple of podcasts, Translash and Marsha's Plate. You'll thank me later. Now, the story I want to highlight for Trans Awareness Week is the one about Nikita Dragon. Nikita is a beauty influencer, brand founder, and trans woman who built her following on YouTube. For some context, she has 27 million followers across YouTube, IG, and TikTok. Well, last Monday, she was causing quite a stir at a hotel in Miami. It was reported that she was walking around naked by the swimming pool, caused a disturbance for a long time, and then assaulted a police officer with some water. I saw the story on IG, and honestly, I didn't know who she was. As you can imagine, beauty influencers aren't top on my list, but what struck me was that when she was arrested, she was placed in a men's unit. A trans woman should never be placed in a men's unit, period. Nikita's rep had this to say: the situation with Nikita, who is legally female, being placed in a men's unit of a Florida jail is extremely disturbing and dangerous. This decision made by the Miami-Dade County Corrections Department directly violates their protocol, which mandates that transgender inmates are classified and housed based on safety needs and gender identity, end quote. Well, we know that didn't happen, so this isn't the end of this story. On Thursday, Nikita was released, and she has a hearing set for early December. I'm highlighting this story in particular because this is part of the work. She was misgendered all up and through that police report. This is why we need lobbyists advocating for trans rights. This is why we need politicians that value trans life. This is why, even if you don't do politics, family, politics does you every single day. And this is just one example of how that can play itself out. Whether you think Nikita was wrong or not, whether you like her or not, a trans woman should never be placed in a men's prison. The violence is clear. It's been documented. Come on, Rainbow Wave. Let's start making some new political waves that create positive change for our community. We're dependent on you. Last week, I reported on the racist puppet show that took place at Touche here in Chicago. Y'all remember that story? Touche is the last standing leather bar here in the city and arguably the most popular one in the Midwest. On November 1st, while celebrating its 45th anniversary, they decided to book a long-standing ventriloquist, Jerry Halliday, to perform with his puppet, Sister Girl. You heard me, Sister Girl. His jokes, and I have mad air quotes around jokes, spanned from loving watermelon, being on welfare, and having multiple kids. The usual 1970s anti-Black comedy, okay? Now, the bar did issue an apology and scheduled a town hall to talk with the community this week. Well, that town hall was canceled. The note read, "Greetings, friends. I regret to say that tonight's community forum will have to be canceled. Not only have I yet to line up a moderator, but now find myself in the hospital and unable to attend. Stay tuned for further updates, David Boyer." Well, that's convenient, isn't it? Especially when you haven't lined up a moderator yet. If you remember, last week I had the opportunity to speak with the founder of ONYX, Mufasa Ali. ONYX is an organization formed 27 years ago and operated by men of color who enjoy the leather lifestyle. Here's a little of what he shared with us.
We were appalled, as that is our home bar. Each of our chapters has a home bar where they host most of their events. We also host events at Club Escape on the south side of Chicago, but our main bar is Touche. And so we were appalled that this was not stopped, even though it may have been booked, that it should have been stopped in the midst of the performance. But there were a whole host of white leather men in the room who were laughing. So it appeared, I think, to the manager that the humor was okay.
Now, ONYX Midwest has issued a statement, and if you'd like to read the full response, I've included a link in the show notes. Let me just tell y'all something. These show notes are magical, okay? Definitely dig into them when you get a little time. Now, back to this response. In the response, they specifically condemn the lack of response from the bar management not to recognize, comprehend, take responsibility, and act to intervene and stop this hurtful performance. The damage caused is beyond measure as a result of the lack of response. They also condemn the complicity of the bar patrons in causing this damage when they sided with the performer when asked if the quote-unquote heckler should leave the bar. They go on to say, effective immediately, ONYX Midwest is removing their colors from Touche, ceasing their monthly bar nights at Touche beginning in November of 2022, suspending David Boyer's honorary membership from ONYX Midwest until after a time frame to be decided by ONYX Midwest, as well as completed educational activities. They also included a list of requirements that would have them consider returning to Touche. Family, honestly, this is one of the best written responses to an anti-Black event I've seen in a long time. It is incredibly comprehensive. It's the blueprint. Well done, ONYX Midwest, and I hope you all continue to grow your community and find your supporters. If anything else unfolds here, family, you know we'll be covering it. And as always, you know I end the podcast with a word. Anna's always got a word. Well, today's word is about Dave Chappelle appearing on SNL. It was time to put the podcast together, so I went to Twitter, right, to see what was trending. I see Dave's name and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. So I go and I start to scroll and I see that he was on SNL. I also saw that some SNL writers boycotted his appearance. While reading through the tweets, I just shake my head because people just don't get it. I mean, they really just don't. The people boycotting Dave Chappelle aren't questioning his genius, which, by the way, I think is a word that we use far too often and too loosely today. That's another word. But let me be clear. I don't think anyone is questioning if he's funny or if he's made an impact on comedy. No one is questioning that. I don't think you can. What we're questioning is why he had to use his platform to be so insanely transphobic. Why give those who hate the most marginalized group in this country more ammunition? Especially when it harms the people I love, you know? Just why? While scrolling through Twitter, I'm able to see clips of his stand-up on SNL. And I want to be clear, I haven't watched the whole thing and I don't have to watch it all to reinforce what I already know. That he has the ability to tell thought-provoking jokes about the most sensitive topics of our time, but decided not to offer that same care and brilliance during that Netflix special. That's one reason it's so infuriating to me, because he could have done it in such a way that would not have caused immense harm. What we know to be true is that if we normalize laughing at folks' identities who are so incredibly marginalized, it causes harm. I mean, we live in a country where only 29% of people know someone who's trans. The ignorance around trans life is very real. So, little known fact about me, I'm really good at compartmentalizing. We don't have to go into my therapy sessions right now, but just know that I am, all right? And so I can say that someone is funny and transphobic. The transphobic nature of their work doesn't negate that they're funny, but we can absolutely call them out on it, especially when they never owned it, especially after being called in and they still didn't get it. We can absolutely choose not to support them because that Netflix special gave a group of some of the most hateful people in this country a space to laugh at the most vulnerable. A group that despises trans folks so much that they will support Dave Chappelle just to hate trans folks more. Most know what anti-Blackness looks like. Most know what anti-Semitism looks like. Most have no idea, no clue what transphobia looks like. If we don't see the problem with that, then I question your humanity. I saw this quote and it says, being human is a given, but keeping our humanity is a choice. So family, the word for today, how are you keeping your humanity? It is a practice, not a given. Till next week, peace. If you enjoyed what you hear, rate and review us inside your favorite podcasting app. This podcast is a production of E3 Radio, your #1 queer radio station playing queer music and reporting on queer news in high rotation.